So it's officially been over a year since the M2 iPad Pro released. It's now come down in price by third parties. And so should you now buy one? Well, let's talk about it. Now, this iPad was never really a bad product per se, but right from launch, there was quite a mixed reaction because, simply put, Apple just chucked a new chipset in here and called it a day. This was a very minor refresh, and so especially when Apple frankly hasn't changed the iPad Pro a lot since 2018, it was very hard to justify getting this, and spoiler alert, that's still the case for the most part. But let's get into this review. So beginning with the design, this looks identical to the 2021 iPad Pro, which looked identical to the 2020 iPad Pro, which also looks identical to the 2018 iPad Pro. These iPads really haven't changed a lot in quite a few years, and I don't blame Apple for not doing much because this still feels like peak iPad design. Yes, there are small tweaks they could do, which I'll get to, but the design mostly works as is. And by the way, would like to remind you guys, like this video and subscribe for more content like this, it would be appreciated. However, if you really want to flex that you have the M2 iPad Pro, there is one single visual difference, and that's the new iPad Pro text on the back, instead of just iPad on previous models, so there's that. Moving to the display, this is where I was a little disappointed with the M2 because, much like the previous M1 model, the 11-inch is stuck with the exact same LCD panel Apple's been using forever. Now, it's not a bad display per se, it's still fantastic in my opinion, but because this is the exact same display you would find on a considerably cheaper 2018 model on the used market, it does make it a tougher sell. But if you shell out for the bigger size, that of course retains the gorgeous mini LED display which we eventually got with the MacBook Pros. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, when watching HDR content, you can undoubtedly see a difference in quality. The higher brightness especially makes a big difference. And so watching movies on this is a treat, but again, this is the same display you're gonna find on the M1 model for a much lower price. Heck, I'm a bit of a cheapskate, so I would even consider the 2020 model because I'm fine with LCD and you get the same benefits of a larger display at a much lower price. Anyways, moving to performance, we of course have the M2 chipset with 8 gigs of RAM, and as one would expect, this iPad basically flies through anything I throw at it. My usage is pretty basic to be fair. The iPad for me is still just a tablet because of the software limitations, and so if you're in the same boat as me, this is truly overkill. I guess the upside is that because there's so much headroom performance-wise, you can expect many years of updates, which is awesome, but I just wish we could take advantage of the power this has. What do I mean by this? Well, to be frank, I just want to be able to boot macOS on this. At the end of the day, whilst iPadOS is perfect for tablet usage, like content consumption, reading books, and checking on social media, it does kind of suck for productivity. There are great apps on the iPad for creative workflows, but weird limitations with iPadOS stops me from using this as a laptop replacement, and so I've really given up on that dream altogether. But if Apple wanted to fix things, just giving us macOS would be awesome. Take for example multitasking on the iPad. Stage Manager feels so much more inferior to use compared to multitasking on macOS. I feel like this point perfectly illustrates my issue with the iPad actually, because yes, you can technically open multiple windows at once and switch between them on the iPad, but it feels a lot clunkier and slower than macOS. Of course, I'm aware that Apple wants to keep the iPad and Mac separate, and so the chances of the iPad getting macOS are basically nil at this point, but because of the software limitations, I really have no choice but to use this iPad as a glorified Netflix machine, which is why it's hard for me to justify spending so much on this M2 iPad Pro, even if the price has come down. Now, whilst I say it doesn't apply to everyone, if you're a student who wants to write down notes for school, or of course needs something for artwork, then the iPad is definitely better than a Mac for those use cases. But even then, you could probably settle for something even cheaper because there's not going to be much of a difference between this iPad and older models when it comes to regular usage. Yes, the M2 has some benefits over A-series iPads like better desktop support, but I don't care. There are many things Apple needs to fix with iPadOS first, and so till those issues get resolved, I'm not replacing my trusty Mac with an iPad anytime soon. Anyways, coming back to the actual review, let's talk about battery life because this has been solid. I've easily been getting 7 to 8 hours of screen on time. Now what sucks for those considering buying this used or from a third-party seller is that of course you can't check the battery health natively on the device. You will have to use a third-party program like Coconut Battery instead, but still it would be much easier for those gambling on the used market for this to be baked in settings. Though to be fair, the M2 iPads are still pretty new, so of course, I doubt battery health on used models are gonna be that bad. Accessories wise, this does use the same Magic Keyboard and pencil Apple's been offering for years, and they're both great. Whilst the Magic Keyboard isn't for me because I'm not using this as a laptop replacement, it is undoubtedly the keyboard to get if you need one. The floating design is really nice, and it offers the same keyboard and trackpad experience Apple's offered on the Mac for years. So if you can find one for cheap, definitely consider it. The Apple Pencil also has remained unchanged for 6 years at this point. But to be honest, there really is nothing much that can change here because it is a great accessory as is that works brilliantly with the iPads. And they did introduce a new hover feature with the M2 models, which works pretty well for the most part, though they totally could have given this to older models because the display hardware did not change and the pencil did not change. So literally it's just a software feature that they could have given older models, but hey, Apple's Apple, they want you to buy the new iPads. Anyways, camera wise, these sensors are pretty decent. This has a 12 megapixel main with a 10 megapixel ultra wide, accompanied by a pretty useless LiDAR scanner, but anyways, I'll be honest, I rarely use the cameras. At most, I'm using the main camera to scan documents, so I was surprised they added ProRes to these M2 models because are people seriously recording professional footage on a humongous iPad? I really doubt that. What still blows me away though is how well center stage works on the iPads. Though one complaint many had at launch, which is still an issue, is the positioning of the camera on the iPads. It's still weird to me, the base iPads, which is considerably cheaper than this, technically is better in this aspect, and so here's hoping the next model has a landscape camera. Let's now talk about Face ID, because I'm kinda 50-50 on this. The positives are that it works very seamlessly and I don't even have to think about unlocking the iPads. As soon as I wake up it's ready to go and that's awesome, but I do actually find myself blocking the Face ID module when holding the iPads. And so overall, I still prefer Touch ID, not gonna lie. I know I'm in the minority here, many love Face ID on the iPads, but those are my thoughts. The audio here is very impressive as one expects. When you have a ginormous iPad that has quad speakers, it does make quite a racket, and so yes, these are very much class leading for tablet speakers, and it's crazy how bassy these are because this iPad's hella thin. Mics are also very solid. There's actually 5 microphones on the iPad Pro instead of 2 on other iPad models. And here's a video mic test for you guys on the iPads. A few other smaller things I want to mention. This has a Thunderbolt port on the side, which is great if you want to transfer things onto this iPad from an external hard drive, but then you realize you have to deal with the horrible Files app, and so yes, this yet again illustrates how the software still hasn't caught up with the excellent hardware. This headline actually perfectly illustrates the state of the iPad because it truly is a V8 engine in like a Ford Fiesta. Anyways, this has the latest connectivity specs, so that's Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3 support, and as one expects, I've had 0 issues. You also get 5G on the cellular version, but I don't really care about that because I'd rather save my cash and go for the Wi-Fi version and just hotspot off my phone when needed. So overall guys, both the 11-inch and 12.9-inch M2 models are still great tablets a year later. They've come down in price, which is nice. But the issue with these iPads, as I said, are not the products themselves, it's the fact the iPads are so similar to the older models. Because if you're someone who wants mini LED or the benefits of the M series chipset, then you can just buy the M1 models, which have come down in price substantially. And if you're like me, who just wants to use this to do iPad things, then you could just save your cash and go for an even older iPad Pro, or even consider the iPad Air instead. At the end of the day, whichever iPad you get, the experience is going to be very similar across the boards. Heck, the $300 iPad 9 offers a very similar experience to the M2 iPad Pro, which makes no sense. So it's about time Apple differentiates the Pro models and justifies the price tag with more software features. And yes, I must mention there are new OLED models on the way which could be worth waiting for, but those are also likely going to be very expensive and might come with price increases. And personally guys, these iPad Pros are expensive as is, and I'm not paying more for something that has slightly darker blacks. And as I said guys, I really have no issues with the hardware right now. It's a software that needs to catch up, and so adding OLED and some fancier hardware changes is not going to make up for the software, which is the real issue. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.